Hello and welcome to Bud Explains, where I take a subject, be that rules, history or concept from the role-playing world, and try to explain it to you in a way that I hope helps you understand how it works. Today's explanation is the origins of Delta Green and Majestic-12. In order to understand the motivations of the shady organisation called Majestic-12, it is prudent to go back to the event that sowed the seeds of the first founding of Delta Green and the emergence of the group, the infamous raid on Innsmouth in 1927, or as Delta Green would eventually call it, Operation Puzzle Box. Agents that represented the US Treasury looked into this small town and reported what they had found to the then President Calvin Coolidge. The Office of Naval Intelligence, US Marine Corps, US Navy and US Coast Guard were brought on board to provide manpower, with a submarine also being deployed to assist. The Bureau of Investigation, along with Director J. Edgar Hoover, were on site and given the legal authority to seize suspected aliens and seditionists so that they could be deported. President Coolidge was presented with photographic evidence of the curious condition of the population of Innsmouth. Pagan idols and artefacts showed a disturbing worship amongst those that lived there, and he made the decision to wait on the report from the Office of Naval Intelligence before taking further steps. During the raid, around 200 Deep One hybrids had been detained, as well as a copy of the log of Obed Marsh's ship, the Sumatra Queen, and details of the Marsh family's history dating back to 1862. 2 copies of Gods of Panope, as well as 5 conical stone tablets covered in glyphs, which also came with some translation notes that had been written by Robert Marsh, who was killed by Marines during the raid. One of the tablets was unreadable, so the Office of Naval Intelligence turned it over to the Black Chamber, a War and State Department signals and intelligence cryptography unit that had operated during World War I. The Black Chamber had broken Japanese code and provided intelligence to the US, which left a lasting impression on the Office of Naval Intelligence, who were impressed by their work. They received the tablets in April 1928, and by November 1929 they completed their translation, calling it the Book of Dagon. President Herbert Hoover was exposed to the Innsmouth incident for the first time, though he was also busy dealing with the Japanese kicking back against the limits that had been placed on their navy and accused the Americans of negotiating in bad faith. On the 24th of October 1929, the American stock market crashed, and in a moment of extremely bad timing, the Black Chamber turned over their report on the clay tablets, with Hoover dismissing the breakthrough as these cryptography eggheads ruining a treaty with Japan, not believing their story of strange creatures that live under the waves. The Black Chamber was subsequently disbanded by the Secretary of State Henry L. Stimson on Hoover's orders. The Operation of Naval Intelligence covered up all knowledge of supernatural events, though their concern was of an aquatic civilization that could stand against their naval superiority, believing that though the White House could choose to pretend that this threat doesn't exist, they couldn't. As such, all of the Project Puzzlebox veterans were moved to the Parapsychology, Paranormal and Psychic Phenomena Desk, otherwise known as P4. During World War I, P4's task was to investigate bizarre and unexplainable phenomena, though it shrank to a staff of 8 once the war ended. They used this time to log any and all reports of these kind of incidents and passed them to their headquarters, and as such many thought of P4 as a bit of a joke. Following Project Puzzlebox, P4 searched the world for more information on creatures like those found in Innsmouth. Their head, Marine Colonel James Whelan, gained the services of former Puzzlebox personnel as well as the cryptographers who had translated the Book of Dagon, similarly collecting all documentation and moving it to Naval Medicine Annex Yuma in Arizona as detailed in the Delta Green scenario Ex Oblivione. Between 1929 and 1942, P4 collected and explored the documentation, discovering the various myths and clearly real forces that had infested Innsmouth. Their search for information about Deep Ones uncovered a broader picture of alien creatures living in the depths of the oceans. Some within P4 were unconvinced of anything other than the Deep Ones, though those that remained in Arizona were clearly a reminder that anything was possible. 2 Deep One colonies were disrupted by P4 during joint operations with the US Navy and the Philippines in a raid off the Pacific coast of Nicaragua, whereby a fishing village had recently adopted the teachings of the esoteric order of Dagon. During this operation, P4 used ritual techniques garnered from Gods of Panope to lure Deep Ones into an ambush. Furthermore, rituals near Innsmouth were used to try to acquire more Deep Ones for study and also discover the location of colonies. They wisely decided against using rituals that were designed to contact more dangerous entities. In addition to this, P4 moved against groups of cultists in the continental US as and when they were discovered. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt instructed Colonel William J. Wild Bill Donovan to put together operations that would provide covert warfare and espionage to the US. Donovan scoured the country for talent, even looking in prisons and contacting the Secret Intelligence Service in England for advice. the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, were formed in the June of 1942. They answered directly to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and it was made up of both civilians and military personnel, though it was instructed to not operate within the United States or Latin America, in addition to the Theatre of the Pacific, due to General Douglas MacArthur voicing his concerns. On February 12, 1942, Donovan was approached by Lieutenant Commander Martin Cook from P4 and told about the supernatural aspects of their work, making him aware of the interest the Nazis had in occult operations. They told him about the Karatechia, a paranormal research department that had the ear of Himmler that operated out of Wewelsburg Castle. Their duties specifically focused on anything occult or paranormal that could assist the war effort. Donovan, impressed that such things could be used to conduct psychological warfare, made moves to absorb P4 into the OSS, and this new division was given a security clearance that was deemed in the highly restricted eyes-only rating. This division was called Delta Green. P4 was subsequently simply known as this by its members going forward. Delta Green began efforts to disrupt the Karatechia with operations that recovered or destroyed books and artefacts that were of interest to them, with professors of the likes of antiquity, anthropology and occult being consulted as to what these things may be. An unseen war was conducted in the Middle East, and many priceless texts, artefacts and archaeological sites were destroyed in order to deny them to the Karatechia. Such was the power and reputation of the Karatechia that even the dreaded SS were afraid of them, and prisoners from Auschwitz and Treblinka were taken away as test subjects. It came as no surprise when Delta Green later discovered that the Nazis were sacrificing these test subjects to the same sea monsters that had infected Innsmouth 15 years earlier. Indeed, Delta Green's first joint operation of the war was one conducted with airborne commandos and French partisans to disrupt a mass sacrifice being conducted by the Karatechia on the French coast in 1942. After Germany surrendered, a Delta Green operation codenamed Summer Breeze was put together to destroy the Karatechia's files and people before Stalin could get his hands on them. Though the main Karatechia researchers were missing, and those that remained were deemed unworthy of extraction and subsequently executed. Hundreds of kilograms of documents were obtained from the Reichsfuhrer Himmler's eyes-only section, and these documents revealed that they had indeed discovered incredible powers but had no way of controlling them. Delta Green found connections to Operation Werewolf, an operation by the SS to organise partisans to resist the Allies. The Karatechia noted that the operation had failed, and as such Hitler himself bypassed the SS chain of command to link with the remains of Werewolf and recreate the accident that had wiped out the site in Bavaria. The site was Norderbaum Castle, or at least where it once sat. Delta Green found that it had been partially removed. The lake nearby had high levels of alkalinity, and the pine trees on the mountain slopes had fallen away as if some gargantuan weight had been pressed against them. It was comparable to two events: the Tunguska blast in Siberia that flattened 800 square miles of forest, and the US Army's atomic bomb tests. The documents seemed to indicate that the accident was not at all the correct term, and that it was more like an interdimensional rip that had been created, though quite how it was done seemed to draw connections to alien and non-Euclidean geometric terms. During 1945, Delta Green fought the remains of Werewolf during 3 horrifying months under Operation Lunacy. The accident was never recreated. The next important date is the 24th of June 1947. The place: Roswell, New Mexico. Delta Green were called in to look into something that had seemingly crashed into the desert, appearing to be a spacecraft or flying saucer. The craft had 3 dead occupants and, more surprisingly, 1 living one. President Truman, at the shock of seeing what had essentially been science fiction being made real, created Operation Majestic, or as it came to be known, Majestic-12. They covered the entire incident up and set about analysing the craft. Delta Green lobbied to be re-established in order to deny alien technology to foreign powers, a lesson that they had learned from battling the Karatechia. In November 1969, a disastrous mission in Cambodia ended in the death of almost 300 US servicemen while attempting to work against a temple devoted to bringing Anchor to Earth. In May 1970, US troops were met with resistance by the Viet Cong and Khmer Rouge, and Delta Green were blamed for tipping off the guerrillas to their plans. The decision was made to disband Delta Green, and on the 24th of January 1970, Delta Green clearance was officially deactivated, and they gradually faded into the background, but this was not the end. In the summer of 1970, 40 former Delta Green agents unofficially met in Washington in order to discuss what was to be done to resist the supernatural threat to the country. Though some of them were aware of the existence of Majestic-12, they did not believe that that organisation was equipped to handling supernatural threats, and assumed that they would more likely see them as something to be exploited. The former agents came to the consensus that they would quietly re-establish contact with other former Delta Green operatives, and over time old alliances were reformed and contact re-established. By Christmas 1971, Delta Green was back, albeit with no HQ, budget, staff or files, which in some way made them work better than before. Jumping ahead to February 1994, US Army Major General Reginald Fairfield was assassinated at home by a team of NRO Section Delta, a wet works branch of Majestic. Unbeknownst to anybody, Majestic-12 had outlived Delta Green and still existed after successfully making contact with the aliens from Roswell, and had actually reached an agreement with them. Fairfield had been investigating Majestic-12 for a while and had learned enough to be deemed a threat, and his assassination was the first direct action that Majestic had ever taken against Delta Green. Unfortunately, Delta Green were not equipped to retaliate against Majestic-12 and made them realise that Majestic posed a threat to the federal government. This triggered a number of changes in Delta Green, and at the end of 1994, the organisation was yet again reborn. The aliens at Roswell, or the Greys as they are known, claimed to be visitors from a dead planet and sought friendly contact with humanity, especially the government of the US. Majestic had brokered an agreement with them that allowed the Greys to violate the rights of its citizens by conducting experiments on them against their will, and Majestic covering up anything they do by whatever means necessary in exchange for information on technology far and above anything available on Earth, inadvertently making the US government complicit. Delta Green, on the other hand, does not believe the Greys to be who they say they are, and believes that they may be another species that have adopted the visage of what has become a universally accepted depiction of organisms from another world, who use them as a guise to make them better able to interact with humans, something they're correct about, but that's a subject for another video. They also believe that Majestic has become corrupted by the Greys, who are using them to advance their own secret agenda. In a nutshell, Majestic has betrayed humanity to further their own agenda and grow their power base. As it stands, Delta Green must operate more secretly than they possibly otherwise would, as Majestic are a powerful enemy to be in the crosshairs of. Many Delta Green agents do not even know that Majestic exists, though they have usually heard the name mentioned in the same breath as UFO conspiracy theories, and are considered at best a myth. Delta Green does not want their existence to travel any further up the Majestic command chain than it needs to be, and as such they are often given only limited intelligence around Majestic and Grey activities in order to stay under the radar and continue their operations. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like and share it, and make sure to subscribe for more Bud Explains videos in the future. Bud out.